This is Jeff Seifert, calling the meeting to order at 1:01 p.m. And the first order of business is to see if there were any matters subsequent to posting the agenda, and I'm not aware of any. So if I don't hear from anyone, I will say that there weren't. And then we will check for public comment before we go into closed session. So if any member of the public wishes to speak, you can use your raise hand function on the bottom of your screen, or maybe it's your top. And I'm not seeing, this is on matters not listed on the agenda. Not seeing any hands. Okay, so we'll go to the consent agenda, which just has a single item. These are the minutes of October 16. Are there any corrections to the minutes from the board? Okay, any public?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I missed that.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, just checking for public comment on the consent calendar. Not seeing hands raised, so I'll entertain a motion.
Move consent.
Valley moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
That was 3CE, I think. Yes. All right, let's do a roll on this one.
Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy.
Yes.
I believe Redwood is absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Consent agenda is approved.
Thank you. So we will be going into closed session, and for any member of the public trying to estimate when to check back in, it's always impossible to know, but I'm guessing we'll take at least 30 minutes. So if you want to do other things for 30 minutes and then start checking back, we will return to open session, and I do expect to have a report out, and then we'll move to the regular calendar. I know Amy Freeman sent a link to the closed session just a minute ago, so you should have a fresh link to the closed session in your inbox, and I'll give everyone 2 minutes to get over there, and I'll see you there soon. Thanks.
Back in open session.
Super. So welcome back, everyone. I do have a report out from closed session. We did a review of our general manager, Morris, and are very pleased to announce that the board unanimously is supporting a 3-year contract extension beginning on it's March 1, isn't that right? The start date of that, and proceeding for 3 years with a base salary of $385, a 5% annual base increase starting in 2026, and a maximum performance bonus of 20%. We did not have time to review all the detailed goals in closed session, and so what I'm going to ask is that we come back and do a session on that in December, but I believe there's time to do that. So that's my report out from that item. So congratulations, General Manager Morris. It's nice to be continuing to work with you.
Thank you, everybody. I look forward to doing the work.
And now I think we actually have to ratify that in open session, what we just did in closed. So with 7B, we have a resolution, and filling in those blanks, maybe I'll just state that, shall I, for the record?
If you care to, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we need to do that. What we've done in the past is created a supplemental material with the final numbers to be posted. But I think your readout already is adequate.
Perfect. So I'll let that stand as the item and ask for any public comment on resolution 241101 for the general manager's employment contract. And I'm not seeing hands on this item, so I'll call for a motion.
I'll move.
Happy to motion it, and just really appreciate you, Alex, and your leadership over the last few years, and just looking forward to working with you in the future. So yeah, happy to motion approval.
Likewise. So let's call the question.
Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy.
Yes.
Redwood is absent. San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
We have unanimous approval of the resolution approving the new employment agreement.
Excellent. Well, congratulate you again. And General Manager Morris, as you get into your report and are thinking about the rest of the meeting, I do know that we have at least a couple members who have a hard stop at 3. So if we can see if we can finish up the meeting by then, I think that will help us keep quorum. So I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And I do think a 3-year extension makes good sense as we shift now into revisiting some of the upcoming multi-year work planning. You'll see there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot to accomplish. So I'm excited to take you through this. I'll be brief, but I also think there are a few slides where I'd like some discussion. Chair Cyphers, what we also have after the GM report is so the GM report includes discussion on new member considerations. I just want to emphasize to everybody that's embedded in the GM discussion. And then after that, we have one resolution that might be quick. So let me jump right into it. First, I'm going to give you some updates that I think are relevant for the board to be aware of, and then we'll go into some other matters. So I wanted to report out that we had a very successful CODIMO site tour and meeting last week in Lompoc, California. The purpose of this meeting was to get a bunch of stakeholders together to start to talk about and better understand the CODIMO offshore wind project. On one hand, we have signed an MOU with it. We see it as a very helpful, promising way for the state to activate its interest in offshore wind, as this project is in state waters, not subject to federal BOEM permitting, and has a bunch of other merits and is 60 megawatts. The site tour was really helpful because we got a lot of the right people in the room, including this nearby Space Force base, the Chumash tribe, or one of the Chumash tribes, a bunch of labor officials, GoBiz, some key local public officials, PG&E, and others. The CODIMO team, which is also known as Sierco, did a great job of sharing all of the work they've done to build local relationships and move the project forward. There's still a huge amount of uncertainty on the project, which I do think is normal for development of this type. But we're in a much better position now to evaluate it on behalf of our members. And a next step I wanted everybody to be aware of is that we'll probably be working through the final stages of phase 1 on this project and then coming to the board with a go, no go decision for a phase 2. That phase 2 would look something like only interested members participate in seeing if they can do further diligence and find a pathway to reach terms to contract for the project. And so I'll be updating everybody about that later. Thanks also to Chair Shaw or Director Shaw for attending and speaking, and also to Director Sears for attending. Lompoc was incredibly beautiful, and so it's a really neat spot, and it also is very isolated. So it was pretty neat to see where the turbines would be, somewhat adjacent to an old derelict oil platform that's out on the isolated stretch of coast. So let's move on, and I welcome further comments. Mitch or Rob, anything you wanted to add on that?
Just appreciated the conversation, Alex. I think, as I said at the meeting, one of the major sort of advantages and takeaways is to be able to be a part of those conversations early, especially because they're in the Central Coast. So I appreciated you pulling together those stakeholders and starting the meeting asking what stakeholders we may need to pull in the future or supplement that group with. But they're important conversations and appreciate you pulling them together.
Yeah, I just add similar thoughts. Yeah, it was good to see the breadth of folks that were in the room, and it was interesting to see how all the parts potentially come together on something like this. So I think it's exactly the right position for CC Power to be in.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Mitch. So again, I'm happy to talk more offline. Let me move on with some other small but important updates on our project contracting and RFO process. So a bunch of work has been going on over the last week. As many of you know, we had shortlisted projects, and we're working to decide with whom should we sign exclusivity agreements, and then after that, there would be a chance for the phase 2 decisions, go no go decisions for members. So recently completed more of the diligence efforts and working with the members to understand their interests. And then in progress, we're really kind of getting this toolkit of a BTA together for the members. And then also developing our own toolkit on exclusivity agreements and sort of building it out. Just as an example, we're developing a power sales agreement term sheet for participation in an owned project. That's not something that we have. And so, there's some sort of core paperwork we would need. And all of this will go into a package for the members to consider when and if we get to a go, no go decision for phase 2. There's a bunch of different types of projects. So you might think of it as multiple tracks. And, foremost among those is the BTA side. We're still looking at that. And we're going to probably be bringing more information to you in December or January on the BTA. But in the meantime, we're also going to be pursuing exclusivity agreements on a wind project for 655 megawatts, so fairly large with all of our members in it. And then also on some long duration storage, 6 members for 50 to 75 megawatts. Now, this exclusivity is not a phase 2 yet, so this just gets us in a position to package everything and come back to the board for a phase 2 potentially in December. And you'll see that in that bottom board. We also know that in terms of niche resources, we're going to need to work hard for exploring geothermal. And so we may take a different approach rather than a solicitation approach. We'll take this MOU approach, and we'll be briefing you on that in December as well. All right, let's move on. And lastly, I just want a quick heads up that these are fairly small, but we'll be reactivating this bulk buy for an RA report. We did it last year, and that'll be coming up here in November, December. It's an annual report that forecasts RA prices from a sort of bottoms up methodology that's pretty robust. We look forward to working with your resource planning working group members on that. And then we'll also be potentially purchasing another fairly large data set through a bulk buy. We call that the data set and information services. We want to talk to the members about what exactly would be the right fit, and we'll be queuing that up in Q1. And then final quick just business update on the contract side, using my authority to sign contracts. You can go to the next slide, please, Amy. The only contract signed outside of the work plan was a 50K. This is actually in the work plan, was the Resource Adequacy Power Pool project, $50,000 time and materials to a vendor called GDS, the same vendor we had used for the first idea assessment on the RA pool. And the second assessment goes deeper into the portfolio side to further quantify what values we might expect from an RA power pool, all preceding a phase 2 go, no go. Okay, let me move on. I know we're going to run out of time here. So so this is the first chance I've had with you all to close the loop from our fall forum. Thanks so many of you for attending that day and participating actively. What I'll run through fairly quickly, and then we'll have a little discussion, is just a recap of some items and talk through this multi-year planning approach we worked on. I'll share some of the findings from many of you, and then we'll check how that fits with the current work plan. I then want to have a quick discussion on this concept of MSAs, which we have not discussed as a strategy at the board. So I want to talk about that, and then we'll wrap this up and really just lay out next steps. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so again, this is about where is CC Power going? Are we working on the right things and prioritizing properly? So next slide. As many of you know, we started with a board-approved strategic plan, and we've developed a model of annual work plans. As many of you know, we developed that by really doing interviews, surveys, building on this phase 1, 2, 3 structure so members understand kind of where they have access to information and what's happening. And we've been using this 1-year look. And then the board approved strategic plan also highlights this sort of forward-looking vision about growing capabilities and achieving other functions or services. And I think where we've struggled a little bit is to know how quickly should we be growing those capabilities while still offering a cafeteria menu model. And sort of what we've been working with for now is a 1-year budget that has a revenue and spending plan and a pretty clear work plan attached to it. And it's only a 1-year look. So that's what we have today. Let's move to the next slide. Um, Embedded, I guess, behind all that is this idea that we have to be doing work that's valuable. And we have different members who want different activities. And I think there's value there. But so on one hand, we may serve the larger members with a suite of services that and deal flow that works for them. For the smaller members, they may want different stuff. But in the end, it all comes back to the same value streams, which is these shared projects, pipelines and deal flow, risk reduction, cost reductions, building capabilities, which may yield future work. And then there's a couple other things that come up in the value propositions, like maybe these signaling functions which help the market react and work effectively, providing a safety net or having influence on behalf of the CCAs. And I just should note, at the end of the year, we evaluated if all the members participated in projects and what they got, and we did show a positive ROI for everyone. So we can go to the next slide. I think everybody's pretty comfortable with this process now, the phase 1, 2, 3, and really our budget and work plan tends to align exactly to this phasing model. So phase 1 is really where we use the working groups. Phase 2 is where people have to opt in, and it's kind of a question of exploring and negotiating a deal. And only if they add on or join in do they go to phase 3, where there's the ongoing work. So for instance, our LDS projects are in phase 3, but on CODIMO, we've been in phase 1. Okay. So I wanted to share now what we've learned from or actually how we approach the information gathering for a multi-year plan. And the multi-year plan will be valuable at understanding how we build capabilities and what works for folks. And as many of you know, we use this relatively simple model of looking at near-term risks and then having near-term functions and capabilities versus long-term risks and then longer-term capabilities. And eventually we want a roadmap that builds all this out for everybody to better understand. So let's go to the next slide and you'll get a sense of it. Again, using this near-term and long-term, what we developed with the forum was visibility to the potential roles, functions, or capabilities people want, and then also critical milestones and experience that would show we're getting there. And on one hand, I think some of this is no surprise. There's interest in CC Power playing this role for you of delivering the projects we have, focusing on these niche resource areas or higher risk procurements, and then maybe doing some select pooling and cost savings efforts. And there was a strong interest in how we build that out. And you can see on the upper right box that really this proof of concept is important to everybody. We have to get these quote wins or ribbon cutting events so that everybody can kind of build on that. And I think we are building market awareness, and some of these functionalities will be really important sort of milestones for us to move forward. An example will be once we get the COA, which is the Coordinated Operations Agreement for our projects, finalized, it's close. And then we get the scheduling coordinator functions up and running, or contracted for and up and running. Longer term, it gets pretty interesting. So really people wanted to see a toolkit and work that is complementary to members. And I think we've struggled with building capability in ways that's always complementary versus duplicative. So that's going to be an interesting area we should look at. And I'll be approaching a lot of this through further meetings with you all, where we really get your specific feedback on this and we translate it into a very specific roadmap. I think there's some future long-term interests are these wider operations toolkits for members. How can we help you? And once we have a proven out joint action model, really where do you want us to build and serve and support you? And again, the idea is all of this is still complementary and optional, but it could be really helpful if we get it structured and you're comfortable with it. And then sort of further blue sky is this idea of looking at co-ops and taking advantage of some of the experiences and lessons learned there. One of the ideas that came up as an example of that was this equipment supply banks. And so looking at the co-op model could be a good fit for CC Power. So I'm trying to move quickly, but there's a lot here. And what you'll see if we go to the next slide is really we're actually on the path for this, but there's still a need to iterate it with everybody. So what you see here is our work plan currently. And if you, again, it's broken into the 1, 2, and 3 phases, but you really see that basically all of the work fits with us building the capabilities and trying to move the organization in a direction that maps. I think there are some questions of, if we're researching an idea in phase 1, is that really the best use of time? And when you step back and you see that it's trying to link to this specific direction from the board, you have to say, yeah, it's a good use of time, but it is a little chaotic right now. And so I think we need to do a better job of sort of packaging up these opportunities so that the members can digest them cleanly. And this is a chance also for me to flag in the middle box these potential or expected phase 2s. Phase 2 is where we work with only interested members on seeing if we can get a sort of bulk contract or a bulk buy for a service in order to get beneficial outcomes there. And one of the models we've used there is called this MSA, or Master Services Agreement. And so on the next slide, I wanted to just discuss with you all very quickly the MSA concept. Oh, sorry, here's additional work areas. We can move through that. Thanks, Amy. So here's a little thinking on the MSA, and this is for discussion. So I've been speaking for a while and I'll pause. But really at the board level, we have this embedded very lightly into the work plan for the year. And the thinking behind an MSA was that we know there's a few services that all of you need and want. And CC Power is not in a position to provide those services. But what we might do is help the members access cost savings or the right service provider through an umbrella contract that we call an MSA. And that umbrella contract would really have some benefits. One is it helps the service provider in a few ways. They get larger scale and access to many CCAs, which I know would be very interesting to service providers. There's a single contract. And then for the member, you get these cost savings, but the umbrella contract really doesn't shape or restrict your experience. The idea of an MSA would be you still can work with the service provider directly. You're just doing so under this umbrella contract. So it's not restrictive. It's only supposed to be beneficial. And then also, once we get all the members under our contract, we start to really get this scale. And then if we ever want to renew contracts or look at other options and next steps, we may have some options there that we wouldn't if we hadn't set up the MSA. And so from CC Power's standpoint, the MSA is, at least in theory, a useful cafeteria menu kind of strategy for members. And so I wanted to just pause and introduce this concept. We have not, as a board, had a chance to really work through this and see if anybody had any reactions. And I think some reactions we may see are that, you're not interested in that, and that's okay too. But if a lot of you are not interested, we don't want to spend time on it. But if some of you don't want to use it, that's totally expected and normal. Director Padilla, I'd welcome your input.
Didn't mean to interrupt your flow there, but a couple of questions. I know we've had a few kind of offline conversations of what the concept or the benefits and the structure of this might look like, but I'm not sure I fully understand exactly how it would work with what our current practice is and how we'd actually get savings, relative to what we do right now, where each of us goes out and selects our preferred scheduling coordinator, which is different for each one of us. I think some of us maybe share the same scheduling coordinator, but we all pick them for different reasons, right? And price not always being the main factor, for sure. My question or my suggestion, and probably is, we have this working group, the resource planning working group. And I think that's the place to really solidify the concept of this, right? And that's the place where, because that's where the people who would be actually doing the scheduling coordination or selecting scheduling coordinators or working day in, day out with them, really understand what the needs are and where the challenges are and what the opportunities are for either short-term solutions or longer-term solutions for that matter. That having this concept really worked out solidly in the working group before coming to the board makes a lot more sense for me, because otherwise I'm just thinking conceptually, I don't know, it seems like a good concept, but I don't know what it is, quite frankly, how it actually
Yeah,
mechanically would work.
So working with your staff to have a very actionable kind of matter in front of you to react to would be the right approach for you.
Yeah, a very well thought out, this is how it's going to work. This is how you get savings. This is how you increase value or increase performance or service level, blah, blah, blah.
That sounds perfect, Director Padilla. That also fits. So just so everybody's closing the loop, this would be, we'd call it phase one work, where we don't know if people are interested. So we want to sniff around and socialize it with, specifically like Monica was suggesting, the working group. That's where the staff are who really should be evaluating this. And that's kind of what the working groups are for. And only if they start to really see value would we come back to you. But I did want to use this just to shop this idea of an MSA as a strategy I'll be mentioning to the working groups and make sure that you guys are generally comfortable with it.
Just a quick process check. How many members can stick around after 3 for 10 or 15 minutes to get the last item done? So we have a quorum. Okay. All right. Carry on.
Thank you. Vice Chair Mitchell, please go ahead.
So I'll be quick. I'm so glad you're looking at this, really supportive of looking at, just generally what CC Power can do as scheduling coordinator. I would like you just to broaden it a little bit. So maybe it's a master service agreement, but maybe it's in-house capability, and that's a long game. I do think, some of the issues that will be important to us, and I'm sure other members probably have similar sentiments, is, that is a huge, I would say just a core operation for all of us. And just really important that it's working well and accurate. And in order for, me to be comfortable switching, I would just be really wanting to make sure that what we're switching to is more reliable. So I think cost could be a consideration, but even more so to me is the reliability of it, and, making sure that, all of our trades are going in right, our settlements are working right, that we're, totally on top of that. So I would just encourage you to think a little bit more broadly as well, beyond just an MSA approach, and really take the long vision of what provides the most value to members. And I totally agree with Monica. I think, engaging the power procurement directors in this is really important, as we start to build this out. And I do view this as a, sort of a long game strategy for CC Power, and just really glad that you're looking at it. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. Thank you. Director Chang?
Yeah, my reaction to this is that I think an MSA contract structure is a fairly straightforward approach. And you could do that as a master service agreement, and then CC Power could farm out to various CCAs, or you could do it as one agreement, and we're just different participants in a contract. And I think either of those constructs is straightforward enough from a contracting perspective. For me, I would prioritize more what are those operational services that make sense to jointly procure, and then we can figure out the right and best, most efficient contracting structure. And there's a lot of operational services we could talk about, scheduling services, billing services, accounting services, marketing services, IT, we all do a lot of things, and a lot of it we do outsource to vendors. And so we probably all have different thoughts on where we see some value in sort of jointly procuring that. My quick reaction is, like, I think a lot of our outsourced services that Ava does are pretty cost effective because there's a network of vendors that serve a lot of CCAs. So we generally get pretty competitive pricing because it's priced with that in mind. So I think it warrants a broader discussion of what really is what is improved upon by jointly procuring. I do believe that there are avenues where it makes sense, but we probably need to evaluate that further. And then my last point would just be, I think it would be good to bring this into a working group. I'm not sure if the resource planning working group is optimal for all of that stuff, because I think that's very power procurement focused, and there are potentially other services that may not be under the power resources sort of department.
Well said, Director Chang. Just a quick response. Yeah, we eventually envision three, well-functioning working groups. We have programs, CCA operations, which is where a lot of the services you mentioned might fit, or the procurement, where really you're working with the staff who deal with the power side of your organizations. And just one note is we understand that maybe this is a phase one, so there may be a go, no go decision where the decision is, no, there's no value here to pursue. And I think that's totally okay. In fact, that would probably be helpful to take some work off the table and know that we've looked at it sufficiently and everybody made a decision.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I'm sorry, one more thing, just in response to that point, is just my take is that this would be a lower priority versus power procurement. So that's just my quick insight to you. And I think it is worth probably finding a way to efficiently gather that feedback from this group, just from a prioritization standpoint, where you want to go, because there's just a ton of operational services you could work on. And so getting that direction is really important.
Thank you. Okay. Well, for those of you who haven't spoken, if you had any thoughts, I did just want to use this as a chance to socialize it. When you talk with your procurement staff, you'll know that we are in the very early stages of mentioning an MSA and starting to sort of build what I would call a sub team to talk about this. To Howard's point, we're focused only on one or two services that we think are sort of more relevant. In this case, they're services that CC Power is already going to need, like an SC. And so we're already going down the path there, Howard. And so it was a chance for us to look at and mention the MSA opportunity. And we'll try to bring the member staff along, and then we'll come back to you and report out. So Chair Cyphers, I'll jump on. So just really quick, wrapping up the work planning. The key message is stay tuned, because a lot of this is now going to come back to you in one-on-one meetings where we sit down, if you have time, and we kind of flesh this out really on priorities, on prioritization of priorities, and then looking year over year what might be valuable for you. And so all that'll translate into a more sophisticated work plan for next year. And my hope is that we really iron out agreement on what we're spending our time on, so that everybody's clear on it and agrees that that was a decision we made together, and that'll be happening. And we'll be tuning that in Q1, and then finalizing it in Q2 of next year, in conjunction with finalizing the budget. So I'm going to move on. We have actually a really exciting topic next. And so thanks to those of you who can stay. We had a great, rich discussion with the board at the last board meeting in October on new member considerations. And the way we approached it, and Chair Cyphers led this, was to sort of tee up some important questions for the board to consider and say, how ready are we for new members? A lot of this occurred because we do have a new member policy, and we have some potential interest in joining CC Power. So we wanted to check in with the board on our readiness to move forward. And what we did was we asked for written feedback, and I wanted to just share briefly some high-level thoughts that came through. Many of you responded, so thank you for your time. Your feedback was very valuable and helpful. And the themes that came through from the written feedback were, there's a strong agreement to focus on near-term wins and to focus on capability building. And there's, I think, some loose agreement that it may be prudent to delay consideration of members, and sort of longer term, there's openness to new members, but near term, there was a couple reasons why maybe we should delay. Those reasons would be, we're not totally sure if we have the right work to help people. So there might be a time where we can have better visibility to the target opportunities we'll present to members, and that would be our work planning. there's also an understanding that we're in a still a formation period, and having more members and more voices is generally trickier to manage. And then I think one last thing that stood out was a unanimous agreement that members of all sizes are important. On one hand, you need large members, they can really help with the scale of procurement, and they can perhaps bring strong credit and other benefits. But then on the small members, they also play a valuable role of really very likely participating in CC Power services. And so there was agreement that having an array of members could be helpful as long as we keep everything balanced. So I wanted to just share this and then hand it over to you, Chair Cyphers, for any sort of comments or reactions. I know we're still in the GM update, but I thought this was an appropriate way to approach this update. Go ahead.
I think that's a good wrap of it. And I think mainly my suggestion would be to test whether the board feels that just putting this matter on hold for a year and revisiting it to buy us some time to work through some of these issues is prudent. I think that kind of direction is where I'm leaning, and I just wanted to see if other board members shared that sentiment.
Yeah, I would support that.
Director Padilla?
I support that as well. I think taking the time to really think through some of the next couple of years in terms of priorities and growth, or maybe next year, however much time you think is very well spent time, because I think the worst thing that we could do is take on more than what we could handle right now. And I think we've got some really big priorities already ahead of us. And so I would support that for sure.
Thanks. Director Chang?
Yeah, I just will quickly echo that similar sentiment. So I'm in general agreement, and I think GM Morris, appreciate the efforts you've made to sort of socialize and speak with other CCAs. I do think it would be good to make sure to communicate to them and any other CCAs for that matter that may have some interest in joining us, that this is more of a readiness and a timing aspect as opposed to strategically. We don't want to broaden out, sort of this JPA to others.
Thank you for fleshing out my proposal further. I fully agree with that. Director Shaw?
Thank you, Chair Cyphers. Yeah, I agree with the sentiments that are shared, and we'll just share or highlight the comment there that having members of different sizes will be valuable to the long-term sort of success of CC Power. Taking a pause, being very deliberate about what that looks like and how we take that on makes a lot of sense right now. And then I just encourage us to continue thinking about, as we're looking at whether it's a master service agreement or other contracting structure, if there are ways to be able to add value to some of those CCAs that may be looking for capabilities in the industry. So there's an opportunity for a couple of different conversations to be simultaneous.
Thank you. All right. So I think you've had some general direction on this, and that clarity I think should be useful for the folks who've been asking, just so that they're not left in limbo. Appreciate it.
Very much appreciate the board's input and direction on this, and I hear you, Director Chang. I'll make sure everybody's aware of where CC Power is at in its journey, and then so they can make smart decisions as well. Fantastic. So with that, we have one additional item for those who can stick on. I do think it'll be quick, and so we can go back to you, Chair Cyphers.
So for item 7D, we have a proposal for project share allocation and ratifying that policy. Is there any commentary on the initial draft was very similar to this with a 50-50 split, and was there any commentary from staff on kind of the very slight adjustment of going to 45-55 for equal share and then size based?
Yeah, I can just remind everyone, we had a robust conversation about this. There was agreement that having a policy we could all readily accept that was called a backstop policy would be useful. We hope to not use it because we want every member to work out the deal that works for them. And this only really applies for oversubscribed projects, probably smaller oversubscribed projects. And so that said, we think having this backstop policy helps because it'll encourage members to work through project share agreements together. And then lastly, there's a sort of art element here of where do we split the pro rata sharing portion versus the size-based sharing portion. And in sort of looking at it, we wanted to shift it ever so slightly to err more on the size-based approach. Now, that's not just favorable to the large entities, but because we don't know who's going to participate in a project. So what this also does is from a backstop policy, it just gives us more flexibility for people to sort of pick the shares they want. And this gives us a little more room on that side. When we looked at some examples, it's probably a de minimis amount because really you're just talking about a change of 5% of the project, and it could be project capacity, it could be a couple other metrics. And so I still think this is a useful default approach and in the red lines to the policy, we very specifically call it out as a backstop, not just a default. It's a backstop approach. And I think that addresses the concerns that came up last time, and I would recommend the board approve.
Thank you. So I'll go to the board. I also really appreciate this. I like the fact that our smallest and largest members get solid access to projects out of this, and it doesn't empower one member over others, unduly. And I think that's really prudent because we do want that diversity of scale. So I think this is really a solid proposal myself, and I'll be supporting it. Any input from the board? I know Director Shaw, I think you have to drop soon. So and so I looking, I think I'm seeing we might be ready to go on this. All right, let's check in for public comment. So is there any public comment on item 7D, resolution 241102? Not seeing hands, so I will look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
I think I heard Peninsula first. So San Jose and Peninsula, let's call the question.
Resolution 241102 to adopt the backstop allocation policy, Ava Community Energy.
Yes.
3CE,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean,
Yes.
Redwood is absent, San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
and Valley Clean. Do we still have Mitch? We do not.
He has dropped.
Nevertheless, so Valley Clean is absent. However, the resolution passes.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all the good staff work on that. Any individual items to share before we adjourn? Not seeing any hands. Thank you all for your time today. This is a very good meeting. Appreciate it.